Welcome to the Know. I'm Ashley.
I'm Brian.
Is this the end of the road for PlayStation 4? No one bought one. And, you know...
It just didn't work.
Sorry, I can't say it with a straight face. No, sorry, it's the opposite. Actually, it's the top console of the generation in terms of hardware sales. But maybe time to wrap things up for the wildly successful machine and move on to what's next.
Yeah, according to none other than the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment.
So credible.
Yeah, he says it's time. At a company event recently, CEO John Kdin said that we're entering the final stages of the PlayStation 4's life cycle.
Which, of course, words like that spread across the internet like wildfire. Because while it's true, PlayStation 4, you know, it's getting a little bit older. It came out 2013. Yeah. And it's, you know, I'm having trouble with math. 5.5 years in. You know, things start to show their age, even with editions like the Pro. But that hasn't stopped it from being the #1 console of the generation for sales. I mean, they're putting it up there with the best-selling consoles of all time. So to hear Sony executives say that they're done, they're kind of over it, or that the end is in sight, I don't know, it's a little bit jarring because you'd expect them to ride that success for a really long time.
Right. Well, age catches up to everybody. All right, let's get into exactly what he said, then we'll give you some context. That's what we do here.
All right. All this happened at a company event called Investor Relations Day, where Sony officials talked to stockholders about the health of the company and about their plans for the future. Yeah,
and that's where Kdin discussed a wide variety of topics, from the future of the PlayStation 4 to Sony's VR efforts to the company's original game IPs. He said some interesting stuff about that.
And Wall Street Journal's Takashi Mochizuki was there to very helpfully give us a rundown of everything that happened since we were not there. In a series of tweets, he quoted Kdin talking about the future of PlayStation 4.
Yeah, and the big news, the headline, is that Kdin was quoted as saying the PS4 is entering the final phase of its life cycle. Kdin added that that would have a negative impact to the unit, but recurring revenue via membership services, etc., should cushion some of that.
All right, so to translate that a little bit, what he's saying is PlayStation 4 is getting old, the end is in sight for the console. Obviously, that's going to have an impact on sales as the console starts to wind down, if they're going to start sunsetting their game calendar for it and so on. But the services like PlayStation Plus, where people pay a monthly fee, they're going to offset the impact from some of that lost revenue.
Yeah, now it's important to note, obviously, they're not going to stop making the PlayStation 4 anytime soon.
No,
that's not in the horizon. The end of a life cycle, it's not the same as saying something's coming to an end immediately. It's more like saying that it's reached its final phase. It's
final form.
Exactly. It's Super Saiyan. It's kind of like saying we've reached the 4th quarter of the PlayStation 4's life.
Right. And meanwhile, Sony is continuing to crank out the games for PlayStation 4. They haven't stopped that. Company is spending a big part of its E3 presentation talking about upcoming exclusives for the console, including what it calls its Fab 4, Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding, Spider-Man, and Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, and some of those don't even have dates yet, so it's going to be around. What's more, Sony officials have already said they're not going to be talking about any new hardware at all during E3 this year. So if the end was immediately in sight for the PlayStation 4, you can bet that we'd be hearing something this year about a PlayStation 5.
Now, what this could mean is that Sony is potentially unveiling its future hardware plans next to E3, possibly sooner than that. They do have PlayStation Experience at the end of the year, but it's not immediate.
Right. And since this happened at an investor relations meeting, Kdin was probably making those comments very candidly to the people putting money into the company, the important people.
Yeah, he talks to those people a little bit differently than he talks to, say, gamers. Right. It's important to note Sony has said it expects to sell 16 million PlayStation 4s in 2018, which is a drop compared to the 19 million sold last year, but still a lot of consoles this many years in. So this could be Kdin explaining that drop in sales to investors, trying to put that in some context. After all, look, the older any console gets, the more the sales go down because, hey, most of the people have got them.
Yeah, if you look at all of them, they spike up and then just gradually over the years drop.
Right.
But yeah, of course, the PS4, it's getting a little old. It released back in November of 2013. We're in the middle of year 5. And while it sold about 79 million units at last count, time catches up with everything. While that last console generation, PS3, Xbox 360, that was super long, but that's unusual. Most console gens are in the 5 to 7 year range.
Yeah, we kind of got spoiled with the last generation, thinking like, oh, 8, 9 years, whatever, is common. It's not normal. But it also means we most likely have multiple years left for PlayStation 4. Again, Sony says they're not talking about hardware this E3, so at the very least, they're not going to roll anything out this holiday season, and that's typically the time when console makers release their new hardware, you know, unless you're the Switch, of course.
Right. As for the future, Kdin did give one more interesting bit of information at the event. It's kind of cryptic though. He said that the period between now and March 2021 would be a time when PlayStation will, quote, crouch down once to stand taller in the future.
All right, so yeah, that's something that could lead to all kind of speculation. What does crouch down once mean?
Yeah, it's tough to tell out of context. There's some translation issues, maybe. Maybe it's a reference to a PlayStation 5. Again, not super clear.
Yeah, now according to another report from that meeting that was published by Game Informer's, Sony CEO Kenichiro Yoshida said the company will focus on PS4 and PSN games until the year 2021. Yeah. During this time, services and software are expected to drive revenue, not hardware sales, according to the report.
Yeah, so that 2021 might be another clue for how much longer that Sony thinks the PS4 has left.
And that actually ties in pretty well with predictions that have come from elsewhere in the industry as well, saying that 2020, 2021 is about the time to start expecting the next generation of console for PlayStation. As for future games, Kdin said we can expect more exclusives from Sony platforms in the future. And for original IP, Mochizuki quoted Kdin as saying, beefing up first-party titles wouldn't just mean more new IPs. Strategy includes franchising successful IPs and refreshing existing IPs.
So yeah, that sounds like we'll be getting some new games from existing IPs in the future.
It's all about that neck! Yeah! Kdin also talked about PlayStation VR, saying that it's growing, but that the industry's growth is below market expectations, which, I mean, considering the market expectations for VR when VR launched is kind of an understatement. They were expecting billions and billions and didn't get close to that. As for the live streaming TV service, PlayStation Vue, Kdin said that it's facing harder than expected competition. Also, they don't talk about it, which might be part of it.
Yeah. As for the next-gen PlayStation, it's worth noting, like you said, some analysts have predicted that we won't be getting a PlayStation 5 until at least 2020, possibly later. So yeah, again, still leaves a few solid years for the PS4.
Don't panic yet, but this is the start of the end. The beginning of the end.
Yes.
The end of the beginning.
Start to say goodbye.
Right. Now, what do you guys think of the Sony CEO's comments on the future of PlayStation? Let us know in the comments.
And for all your Sony and PlayStation news, be sure to like this video. If you're new around here, subscribe to the Neb.